All right, let's get right into it. For a long time now, scientists have been piecing together evidence of a massive, global-scale crime, the shocking disappearance of species all over our planet. Today, we're going to play detective and uncover the main culprits.
I know, it's a huge question, right? But it's the mystery we absolutely have to solve. So, our planet has seen 5 major mass extinctions before. The difference is, the evidence we're about to look at suggests this 6th one isn't being caused by a giant asteroid or a supervolcano. It's happening right now.
Okay, so this is where the evidence gets really stark. See that first bar? That's the normal, or background rate of extinction, what you'd expect to see naturally over millions of years. Now, look at the second bar. That's the rate today. It is soaring hundreds, maybe even thousands of times higher. This isn't just some natural cycle. This is a 5-alarm fire. So if it's not a natural thing, then who or what is responsible? Well, the evidence is pretty overwhelming. It all points back to us. To help organize this investigation, we're going to use a really helpful acronym that biodiversity researchers came up with, HIPPCO. It stands for the main causes of extinction, and we're about to track down each of these suspects one by one. Let's get to it. Our first and most wanted suspect is the H in HIPPCO, habitat loss. And let me be clear, this is, without a doubt, the #1 greatest threat to wildlife on the entire planet. When we say habitat loss, we mean the complete and utter destruction of a species' home. You know, every time a forest is bulldozed for farmland or a wetland gets paved over for a new shopping mall, we're literally erasing pieces of the map where wildlife can live. But it's not just about destroying habitats. It's also about dividing them. This is called habitat fragmentation. Basically, it's when we take one big, healthy habitat and chop it up into a bunch of smaller, disconnected islands. Just picture a highway slicing right through the middle of a forest. What used to be one big home is suddenly 2 tiny ones, and trying to get from one side to the other is a death sentence. And the fallout from this is huge. These fragmented little islands of habitat isolate animal populations, which means less genetic diversity. They also create more edges, which makes it easier for predators to hunt. And crucially, they can completely block ancient migration routes, making it almost impossible for animals to find food or even a mate. Okay, our investigation now leads us to the second biggest cause of extinction, the I in HIPPCO. These are the invasive species. Think of them as unwelcome newcomers that just show up and completely wreck the place. Now, here's a really important distinction. Not every species from somewhere else is automatically invasive. A species becomes invasive when it gets to a new place and, well, there's nothing there to keep it in check. No natural predators, no diseases it's used to, and without those natural controls, their population can just explode. So, just how big of a problem is this? Well, check out these numbers. In the mainland US, these invaders are a major threat to 42% of all endangered species. But look at an isolated island ecosystem like Hawaii. That number just skyrockets to a mind-blowing 95%. Let's meet a few members of this most wanted list. First up is the kudzu vine. It was brought over from Japan way back in the 30s to help with soil erosion. The thing is, it did its job a little too well. This stuff grows so fast, it can literally swallow entire forests, barns, pretty much anything that stands still for too long. Then you've got these guys, the Asian carp. They were imported to keep fish farm ponds clean, but they escaped during floods and got into the Mississippi River. Now these huge fish are everywhere, gobbling up food that native species need. And they have this crazy habit of leaping out of the water, and they can actually injure people in boats. And finally, we have the Burmese python down in Florida. This all started with people releasing their exotic pets when they got too big. Now it's a full-blown ecological disaster. These massive snakes are at the absolute top of the food chain in the Everglades, and they eat pretty much everything they can find, from rabbits and deer to, yes, even alligators. Okay, let's talk about 2 factors that are kind of like accomplices in this whole thing. They are the 2 P's in an HIPPCO, human population growth and pollution. The best way to think about them is as force multipliers. They make every single other threat that much worse.
So, first up, population. Back in 1800, there were less than 1 billion people on the whole planet. By 1975, there were 4 billion. And today, we're over 7.9 billion and still climbing. It's simple math, really. More people means more demand for resources. And that drives everything else, from habitat loss to pollution.
Now for pollution. One of the sneakiest kinds is chemical pollution. It leads to something called bioaccumulation. This is basically when a tough, persistent toxin, like the pesticide DDT, gets absorbed by an organism, and it just sits there, building up in its fatty tissues because the body can't get rid of it. But that's not even the worst part. That accumulation leads to biomagnification. See, when a predator eats something that has that toxin stored in its body, the toxin gets passed up the food chain. And since a predator has to eat a lot of prey, that poison becomes more and more concentrated at every single step up. This slide shows it perfectly with the story of DDT. Look, it starts as this teeny tiny concentration in the water, so small you'd think it couldn't possibly do any harm. But then it gets absorbed by plankton. Small fish eat the plankton. Bigger fish eat the small fish. And by the time you get to the top of the food chain, to a bird like an osprey, that concentration has magnified to 25 parts per million. This is exactly what caused the eggshells of birds like the bald eagle to get so thin they would crack, which nearly wiped them out. And that brings us to the last suspect in our investigation, the O in HIPPCO, which stands for overexploitation. This is the direct removal of species from the wild at a rate so fast, they just can't keep up. Really, this just boils down to taking too much too fast. I mean, humans have hunted and fished forever, but overexploitation is what happens when our technology and demand let us take animals out of the wild way faster than they can reproduce. It pushes their populations right to the brink of collapse, and it includes everything from industrial overfishing to the illegal wildlife trade. The exotic pet trade is a huge part of this. And this quote, how it really reveals the hidden tragedy, doesn't it? That one animal you might see in a shop is often the only survivor of a long, brutal journey where so many others died along the way. So what's driving this whole devastating trade? Money. Pure and simple. A single live mountain gorilla, and there are only about 1,000 left in the entire world, can sell for $150,000 on the black market. And it gets even more insane. The horn from a single black rhino, which is poached and sold for use in traditional medicine, can be worth up to $500,000. With that kind of money on the table, you can see why this is so incredibly hard to stop. So, there you have it. Our lineup of suspects: habitat loss, invasive species, population growth, pollution, and overexploitation. HIPPCO. Our investigation has pretty clearly identified the human activities that are driving this crisis. The mystery is no longer a whodunit. We know who's responsible. The real question is, now that we know, what are we going to do about it?